Hello everyone. This week we are looking at the chapter in our textbook on Bayesian classification. And really the textbook makes a really good point that Bayesian classification is used really to look at documents and determine which category a particular document comes in. And one of the most common applications of Bayesian classification is the ability to flag spam email. We could look at certain words and determine if those words are in fact the words that would fall into a bucket of tokens that would be most likely to be in a spam email. They're not foolproof by any stretch of the imagination, but they work pretty well. And as anybody who can see their spam email filters work, they can attest that those are pretty good uses. There's this whole section in the textbook that talks about probability, and I am less concerned actually about you learning the probability piece than I am about you learning the functionality of how we can take text and we can break it into tokens and we can make meaning out of it. So what I have done this week is I have constructed an exercise that looks kind of similar to what the exercise is that Foreman has constructed in his book, but it doesn't use the probability stuff. So I'm going to walk you through that exercise this week. I'm going to give you this file and I'm going to have you do the same exercise on the file. And I also want you to actually sort of make some meaning out of the file. So what this file basically is a very simple file, and this is what you'll get. You'll get what's in column A. And in column A are 15 comments, just sample comments, that we extracted from a customer service survey. And so you'll see things like excellent customer service, happy to shop here again, products were great, service was very good, all the way down to a bunch of hype, service was fine, but prices are out of range. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through these 15 comments, and we're going to break them up. First of all, we're going to customize or clean up the text a little bit. Then we're going to break them into tokens, and then we're going to count the tokens, and we're going to look at what we can make, what meaning we can make out of it. And I want you again to walk through each one of these. So again, the file you're going to get is going to have just column A. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to remove all of the capital letters. So we do that, as you can see in the book, by coming over here and saying use lower A1. Now I don't have any labels in this file. You'll probably want to put labels in the other pages that you're going to create just to keep things straight. But in this particular case, I don't have any labels. So I just set the value in B1 equal to lowercase of A1. And then when I do that, I can come over here and move my cursor over to the bottom right-hand corner. When I get the small plus sign, if I double-click there, it'll take that function and apply it to all of the data rows. So you don't have to do it each time 15 times. You just do it the one time, lower B1, hit the little double click over here, and it makes all of them lower. And so now we're ready for our next step. The next step we're going to do is we're going to have to remove periods because that will just mess with us. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we are going to take out any periods that have a period and a space. That would be the period after the end of a word. And so we're going to use the substitute command, and equal sign substitute. We're going to start with B1, so that's the first part. So B1, comma. There are three parts to this command, so B1 is the first part. The second part is quote, period, space, quote. And that would be to capture any periods where there's a space that immediately follows it. And what we're going to do then is we're going to substitute that with a single quote. So we're going to take two characters, the period and the space, and we're going to substitute in just a single space. And that single space will become important as we parse through the file and we identify words, because it's going to be the spaces that are the indicators of the beginning and the ending of words. So we'll go ahead and run that, and we get that done on B1, or C1, I'm sorry. Then we can go ahead over to the right, lower right-hand corner, double click, and it takes it and applies it to everything. What you'll see, however, is that there are still periods at the end of the sentence. And again, we want to get rid of those periods because we don't want them there. So we're going to go over here to D1. And on D1, we're going to do a substitute command again. But in this case, we're going to substitute what we have in C1. So C1 is our source. And we're going to take any place where you have quote, period, quote, just a single period, which would be the case at the end of the sentence. And we're going to substitute in quote, space, quote. We get that done. And we double click on the right. And it brings it to all of the 15 rows. All right, that's our first step. Our text is clean. You'll see that they're all lowercase letters. They're all separated by one space. They should look pretty clean. The next thing we're going to do is a little bit complicated, but what we're going to do is we're going to move over to something called tokens. And tokens is where we're actually going to take these 15 rows and we're going to break them up. The first step in breaking them up, though, is to give each word its own row. And to do that, we have to come through and count the number of words. And in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we would need 8 rows just for this particular comment. And then we'll need another series of rows for this comment. So we can have each word has a row for itself. And the easiest way to do this is just to take the longest one. This is the longest one. It has 25 words in it, and multiply it by 15, which would give you 375. Now, it doesn't hurt if you have more rows than you need, so we could just go in with 400, just round it up to 400. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste these comments into 400 rows. Now, when you take something that is shorter and you paste it into something that is longer, what happens is it just repeats the sequence over and over again. So when we take these 15 comments and we paste it into 400, it's just going to repeat the 15 comments over and over and over again until it runs out of rows at the 400th row. And that's all fine. It's all easy. So first thing we're going to have to do is we'll go over here and we'll capture these and we'll do a copy. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here to our tokens, and we will have already identified 400 rows. But we would need to come through and we would need to highlight those 400 rows, use page down to get there faster. And once you get to 400 rows, or however many you have, should be about 400, then you can do, this is the tricky part, and don't mess this up, because if you mess it up, you'll mess everything up. You have to right click and pull down to Paste Special. And Paste Special is the second one in. It gives you just the text, and that is what you want. You want just the text. So we'll go ahead and do that. And now we have our comments. Now I did put row labels here, or comment labels here. So I have comment here, I have space position here, token here, and length here. This really follows the book, and I put the labels in there so that you could be consistent with the book. In the book it's called token, but we're looking at comments, so that's okay. And what you'll see is that starting on row 2 is our first set of 15 comments, and then starting on row 17 is our next set of 15 comments, and so on and so on. And what that allows us to do then is to break each one of these words up and give a place over in the columns to the right for each one of those words. Now, here comes some more tricky stuff. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to identify where the first letter is and where each subsequent next word begins. So in this particular case, we're going to start with 0. And this again is consistent with the book, and we'll take care of the fact that nothing really starts at 0. It should start at 1. And then our formulas that follow, when we actually identify the tokens and then identify the length, we actually account for this. So the first couple you can just go ahead and put in 0 in the first 15. So all the way down from B2 to B16, go ahead and put in zeros, because that's basically the start of the sentence. Then in B17 is where we start over. So we're going to come through and we're going to put in this command, and you'll find this command in your book. The only difference is instead of it being A152, it's A17, because they had 150 comments, we only have 15. So we're going to go ahead and put in if error, and then we open paren, find, and we're going to find, what are we going to find? We're going to find a space, okay? And we're going to find the space in A17, okay? The start position is going to be B2 plus 1, which is over here, B2 plus 1 is 1, and we're looking for a length that is A17 plus 1. So all this is just basically saying, go ahead and find me the next word, basically the next space, and then tell me what all those characters are that are there. And this is basically just identifying where the spaces are. Okay, so we're going through and identifying, in this particular case for this sentence, the very next space. If we start at 1 and we count all the way over, the next space we're going to get is going to be 10. Boom, 10. Then on the next line down, products, that's an 8-character word, so the next space is going to be 9, and there it is, 9. And so we are doing pretty well here in identifying where all of the spaces are. And you'll see as you go down the file, the numbers get bigger because we're making our way over to the end of the sentence. Okay, we have to have the if error then in there in case we run into any error conditions where we've run out of text, and so it can account for that. All right, that gives us our space positions. It tells us where all of the spaces are. The next thing we can do is we can take that space position and we can identify the tokens, okay? And that's done using a mid command. What mid does is basically strips out some number of characters from your sentence. So you're saying basically start starting with A2, this is where we're going to start. We're going to look at A2, okay? What I want you to do is I want you to say, all right, the starting position is B2 plus 1. B2 plus 1 is 1, so we're starting at 1. We're starting at the E for excellent, okay? And then you're going through to B17, which we've already identified as 10, and we're going to subtract out B2, which is 0, and 1, which is 1. So remember, B10 is the space, and we don't want to extract the space. We want to attract everything to the left of the space. So what we do is we knock down B17 basically by 1, and that gives us the first 9 characters, which is what we put right there. That is the first 9 characters of the sentence. Every single one of these does exactly the same thing. It just advances the rows. So we can identify these tokens using a number of different methods to identify the actual tokens themselves. So what we did, let's step back for a second. Remember, because we have 15 rows, and these all 15 start at the very beginning, we put 15 zeros in here. When we come down here, we adjusted it so that we were actually trying to use some logic to find when the next space was going to be. Instead of us having to type that multiple times, what we do is once we get it done once and everything looks good, we come over here to the lower right hand corner and we double click it, and it advances that all the way down to the bottom of the file. So it finds all of the spaces and knows how to increment that as it goes. It just updates this length A17, updates all these values so that it knows how to follow all the way through to the end of the file. We do the same thing up here. When we find the first token is this mid, goes ahead through A2, pull out all of the text that is within these regions, okay? And it gives us that, and we hit this double click on the right, and it does it all the way down. Now, why do we have the period at the end, and why do we have the if error? Because at some point in time, we are going to run out of text. In other words, we're going to try to extract text out of ranges that no longer exist where there's no more text. So what we do is we drop a period in there. So an if error command in Excel, what it does, it says run this command that's within these parentheses and do it until everything's great. But as soon as you hit an error, hence the if error, then do this. And that's what it's doing here. It's doing something very similar here. Do a find me a space, here's your range, and if you run into any problems, then go ahead and set that length to a different value. Okay, last thing we're going to do is we're going to do something fairly simple. So we've got all of our tokens, we've got all of our spaces and our tokens. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to set the length. Now this is really easy because all we basically do is say how long is the token in in this case C2. So it's just len equals len C2. So you go ahead and pop that in there and then double click on the right side and it drops it all the way to the end. All right, the last thing we're going to do now is we're going to filter our tokens. We have some hundred tokens. You'll notice right away that there is a lot of really small, really repeatable tokens that probably don't really tell us all that much. These are words that don't really give us that much. So we're going to go ahead and do a pivot table that's going to allow us, first of all, to filter out all of the small ones, and then it's going to give us that's how we use the length column to filter out the small ones. And then it's going to sum up the count of the tokens so that we can start making some meaning out of the file. So what we'll do is we'll come over here and we'll capture column C and column D. We'll come up to Insert, Pivot Table. And we're going to insert a pivot table, and I've already actually got it here, but I'm going to go through and run it through again so you'll be able to see it. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I have rows selected, so it's going to mess me up. I'm going to go ahead and come over to my pivot table. This is what you'll see, is you'll see this here. You'll get your two columns, and you'll see this over here. You're going to have to do some filtering on your pivot table. So what we want to do is we want to look at our rows are going to be the token. So go ahead and drag token down to rows and drop it there. And then we're also going to come up with a summation value, which is going to be the count of the tokens. So get your token and drop it into the summation values. We're going to filter on length. So go ahead and grab your length value and bring it down to the filters. Then when we want to look at what's in the filters, we come into the filter, and initially it will have everything selected. So you'll have all values. And that's what you don't want, because it's going to give you a whole bunch of useless stuff. So we're going to come down here and we're going to take some of that out. We will go ahead and click off on 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now what we've just done is we've eliminated any tokens that are 3 characters or less. We do that, and we've got what's left. We go down to the bottom, we get a total summation of tokens is 116. Now this is what the book uses to determine probability, because any one of these 116 words can show up with some variable probability. This one, for example, thought, it would be 1 divided by 116 would basically be the probability that the word would actually be in that set of command or comments. But what we can do is let's start looking through some of the higher values. We see back 4 times. That could be that the customer's either going to come back or not going to come back to the store. Great, we see 7 times. So in those 15 comments, the word great appeared 7 times. That's pretty good. Happy appeared twice. Good appeared 3 times. So between good and great, things appeared 10 times, which is pretty good. High appeared 4 times. That might be a consideration about high prices. Higher also appeared 2 times. So between those 2 words, out of 16 comments, high and higher appeared 6 times. So that could be customer service is higher, whatever. Long, which is something you really don't want to see typically in a customer service, a list of customer service commands, showed up quite a few times. But here's one that's really telling. Prices showed up 8 times. Out of 15 comments, the prices were mentioned 8 times, and that's something we really want to look at. Is it because people think prices are low? Generally, people don't comment when prices are low. They're probably going to comment when prices are high. And we also saw up here that we had high and higher were showing up 6 times, along with prices showing up 8 times. That could be a concern. Service was mentioned 11 times. So in 15 comments, we saw service appear 11 times. That's kind of a big deal. And so this just gives us something to zone in on. Now we can go back to our original comments and look at what they really said, and what they really were considering important enough to include in the initial survey comments. Now, just to sum up, this is 15 comments, and we could have looked at this, ourselves. But what if it was 1,500 comments, or if it was 15,000 comments, which is more likely to happen if you've got a large-scale business? Then when you come back to your pivot table, you're going to see numbers here. Instead of 11, you might see 110. You might see 80. Same kind of thing, same kind of principle, but we're able to parse through text and work through it to figure out what the major themes are. So for this week, what I really want you to get out of this is just that exercise of going through data and sort of cleaning it up and getting it ready, setting up the tokens. If you have any challenges or questions, don't hesitate to ask me about setting up either the use of the find function or the mid function. Remember, the find function is finding our spaces and setting us up so that we can actually run the mid function, which the mid function depends on the results of the find function, and the mid function is extracting out text from one of our comments from the starting position to an ending position, and if it fails because of the if error, it just drops a period into the result. The length is pretty straightforward. It just measures the length. Then when we go to our pivot table, we bring those 2 columns over. We'll get this all set up. The one thing that won't be set up will be the filters, the rows, and the values. And you can set them up just as I've shown you here. And then you go through your filter, the top, and you take out the ones that are 0, 1, 2, or 3. And that will clean up everything and give you significant tokens. And then you can take a look at your tokens. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know. All right.